Okay guys, so in this video we are going to talk a little bit about finding the right employer. So let's get into it. So we're going to cover things to consider before you start looking for a programming job, how to plan your job finding process a little bit, and the steps you should follow for every employer that you talk to. So first and foremost, we need to define a few things. So the first thing that you should prioritize when you go into the work industry is that, or rather when you're finding your first job, is to have the mindset that you want to find the right employer. Now, the reason why this is so important is because when you first start out, your market value is going to be fairly low. And that basically just means that you simply don't have the skills acquired yet that you need in order to be able to go to basically any employer and say, hey, I know this stuff, I can be productive immediately, which means that for any employer who wants to hire you, you're going to be a little bit of an investment. So having the mindset that you're going to go for the highest salary right off the bat is actually not that useful to you. What is useful to you is to find the employer that is going to give you, or rather help you get, the skills that you need in order to just be another programmer. So if someone has told you that, a programmer who comes out of college or something like that is just ready to go out and do work, that's a complete lie. I can tell you that I've worked with many junior developers from different colleges, and they have had master's degrees and so forth. They don't know shit about software development when they come out. They're talented, intelligent people, and just as me, when I came out of my education, like my college education, I mean, you have a foundation, you have something to start off, and that's kind of where you are. But just much like you would expect a doctor who comes right out of medical school to have a few years of hands-on practice and practical skill development, it's a very similar thing for programs. You have to actually apply the things that you've learned in school. So with that said, that means that the first thing that you should focus on is to finding a company that has the right attitude towards your education and is making an investment in your development, because that is going to be the thing that is going to make you into a professional. And once you have one or two, like a few years at least, of actual work experience, your market value will rise. And when you have a market value that is on par with the rest of the industry, you are going to find it fairly easy to find a new job. And when that happens, you can actually start to be a little bit picky where you want to work and how much you're going to ask for in terms of salary. So let's start off by asking, what companies should you contact and what should you kind of think about? So the first thing that you should, like a good first rule of thumb, is that basically larger companies, and specifically larger product companies, well, these companies are usually, they're a fairly good bet in the beginning of things. And the reason for that is because they are usually a little bit more mature. They have they have teams, internal teams, and basically they have the resources and most likely the patience to actually train you in a proper manner. Now, I'm not saying that this is exclusive to large product companies, but they are among the best choices for a complete beginner. And this is of course just based on my personal experience and the experience of my friends and coworkers and so forth. It's a very you should probably favor this sort of company in the beginning at least. So when it comes to consultancies, which is another way of going, it's a bit risky early in your career, but it can of course also work well. The thing that you should keep as a personal check is whether or not you have a team or you work in isolation. And this is just, I would say this is just generally true. If you are a complete beginner programmer, you're a junior programmer, you're starting out on your first job, and you work in isolation, that is not a good thing. It's something that you should fix quite rapidly, because when you work in isolation, you don't have anybody to shoot ideas off of. You don't have a more experienced programmer showing you the ropes. You're basically just trying to accommodate to the best of your capabilities whichever request that you're getting from your employer. Now, that will give you some training, but it's very unlikely that you're going to develop as quickly and in line with what the rest of the industry is going to expect of you. It's actually one of the main reasons why freelancers can sometimes find it very hard to get a job at the real IT company, because although they have coding experience, they've worked in isolation and not actually learned how people write software as professionals actually write software. So you can write some code and you can get the program to do something, but you can't write the program in the way that the industry is going to expect of you. And other programmers will notice this, and they will probably dismiss you because you simply don't have the correct training. So it's a very good check. Make sure that you are not working in isolation, because if you are, you need to have a look at that quickly. So what should you do before contacting a company? So basically, before you reach out to a company or you respond to a recruiter or something like that, you should have just take a bit of time and do some quick research on the size of the company and get a little bit of a background on the company itself. I'm not saying that you should research it all that. That depends on you, of course, but it is very useful for you to have a feel for how big the company is and what type of company it is, because although there are many companies out there and the sizes vary and the field may be so what we call IT, you have to think about the business model of the company. Say the mindset of a company such as, say, Google or Facebook is going to be very different from something like a small-time consultancy, or a telecommunications company, or a company like a car manufacturer and so forth. Because remember, guys, just like I know that Facebook, Google, and these super large IT companies, I mean, remember, there are a lot more other industries out there in the world that all need programmers. It's not, the way the things that work in these like specialized IT companies is not necessarily the same way it's going to work in other areas, in other industries. So you need to remember that. So a good rule of thumb here is to have a bit of a look at the job positions and read the tech skills the company is asking for, because the tools the company use will tell you a lot about the culture the company has. So what I mean by that is that if you look at, it's very common to see that small startups usually have some of the trendiest tools, while you'll see that really large corporations who are not Google, Facebook, and like these super trendy IT companies, they will usually have older tools, if you will, and you see these subtle differences in the different tech. Basically, the tech stack is usually a very good reflection of what type of company you're actually looking at. So when it comes to like older tools, it's usually a sign that the company itself is a more conservative organization. And what I mean by that is not that it's a bad organization, it's just that you cannot go into, let's say, I'll give you an example. If you decide to start working for a bank, it's very unlikely that you'll go in there and get to work with, say, Golang or Rust or pick your favorite most modern tech tool. Like, it's probably unlikely that you're even going to have to get to work with, say, Docker or any type of modern tech stack. It's very likely, however, that you're going to work with things that have been relevant for the rest of the industry, or not relevant. It's very likely that you're going to have to work with stuff that is fairly outdated. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing, because although you may think that everything in IT is about working with the latest and the trendiest things, it's actually not. What's much more healthy is if you are working with things that are relevant, and there's a range to things that are relevant, because one mistake that you may make is the idea of thinking that, oh yeah, just because something is being promoted by Google and Facebook and all of the internet and the bloggers are excited about different languages and technology and so forth, that doesn't mean that that is a good idea just for work purposes. Because what the industry is using, like most of the industry, I'm not talking about the bleeding edge companies, I'm talking about almost every other company, that's the thing that is going to give you work relevancy. Knowing some super niche, super trendy tool is not as valuable as knowing something that is a little bit older but still very popular in the industry. And that's the key thing here. A little bit older. You don't want to find yourself working for a company where the tools that they are using is so outdated that it's almost on the other extreme. You want to find that sweet spot, that middle ground, where you're trying to find a company where they have relevant tools for today, not necessarily the most bleeding edge stuff that nobody's using, and not the stuff that is so old that nobody is using it anymore, right? I hope that makes sense to you. So if the tools are super trendy, as I said earlier, it's very likely that the company is a small startup, because frankly, it's only fairly young companies and the absolute bleeding edge IT companies who have the sort of mindset where they basically just keep up to date with, well, pretty much anything that is happening in the IT world. More, conservative organizations usually don't change their tech stack all that much. And there's nothing wrong with working for a startup, but you should know that the smaller the company, the likelier that it is that you're going to work fairly hard. You are most likely going to lack any type of real structure in the organization, depending on how big the startup is, because young companies are, they usually have a very short time span, like they don't have the sort of infrastructure and maturity that the larger corporations have, because they are, they're fairly young still, and they simply can't afford having all of the overhead process and administration work that comes with having a work process that is the same as, say, one of the large corporations. So the good thing, which is kind of nice, is that you're most likely going to work with the most cutting edge stuff. You are also most likely going to have to be a full stack developer of some sort. You're going to have to do pretty much, or be a part of a lot of stuff, because since the company is fairly small, it's very unlikely that they have the sort of money that is required to hire specialists in everything. It's much more likely that they are going to have to hire a lot of generalists, people who are pretty good at a lot of different stuff. And if that's what you're looking for, it's perfect. But as I said, it's likely that there won't be much in terms of process, and it's very likely that you're going to have a fairly hectic work environment. So let's talk a little bit about the interviewing process as well. So once you actually have decided on a company that seems to be able to give you exposure to the tools that you want to work with, and seems to have the sort of structure that you need in order to actually develop your skill sets, now basically comes to figuring out, okay, how can you figure out if what your assumptions have been so far is actually going to measure up. And the sad part about this is that most of the hiring processes in IT is very optimized from the employer's perspective. And the problem here is that if your goal is to find the best co-workers and the best environment to work in, it's very likely that you're going to have to go fairly far into the interviewing process until you can figure that out. So basically, it's very unlikely that you're just going to be able to call in and talk to whoever is responsible for recruitment at that company, from that one person, figure out if this is a good work environment or not. You're going to have to go a little bit further. So basically, you're going to have to talk to people. It's because once you have gotten in contact with the company, and it seems, if it seems promising, you should ask to meet at least one of the developers that you're going to talk to. It's kind of funny, because to me this is fairly obvious, and hopefully it makes sense to you as well. But you should be aware of that this is actually sometimes kind of uncommon depending on the company, but it's very important that you do this, because if you get to talk to people that you're going to work with, from that you will be able to figure out if this is going to be a good work environment for you or not. So a good rule of thumb is that you should show a genuine interest for your craft, and not only because hopefully you actually do enjoy doing so, producing software. Hopefully you enjoy being a programmer, but it also allows you to very naturally ask so-called, what I call, open questions to your future coworkers. And the reason why you want this is because you need to figure out if you are going to be able to collaborate with the people that you are going to work with. So what I like to do when I'm in an interview, I let them ask questions from me, Of course, they're going to have tons of questions, and just from a professional perspective and from their perspective, it's also very nice if I have, if you have questions back, because it shows that you are interested. And if you have another developer who might be your potential future coworker in the room, it's actually very easy for you to say something like, "Oh, I really love this thing. Let's say Node. I really love Node. Do you have anything in IT that gets you excited?" Or or if you have some background on the person, you can ask them, "I've heard that you are pretty good at C# or something like that. What's your favorite feature? How do you?" And one really good one is this one. This has been very useful for me. How do you onboard people? Do you do any type of pair programming? Because these sorts of questions, these open questions that allows the person who you're talking to kind of share their own thoughts about these processes, will give you an indication as to how the daily work actually is done at that company. So by doing that, you can very quickly get a feel for if the person that you're talking to enjoys their work and how likely they are to enjoy collaboration. Because remember, in the beginning you will have tons of questions and everything will be new to you. So it is vital that you figure out if the people you are going to be mentored by, because remember, if you're talking to your future coworkers and you're a complete junior, these are the people you're going to ask for help. These are the people who are going to have to be there for you when you don't know how something works. So it's vital that you feel comfortable with them, and so that when you actually need help, you don't sit in your own little corner of the office and you're afraid to talk to people. Because if you don't have the option, or you don't feel as if you have the option to talk to people, you will cripple your own learning. And it's going to that's pretty much the same thing as working as an island or working in complete isolation. And that's the thing I said earlier. That's the worst thing that you can do. You need to be in a collaborative environment so you can learn from your peers. So to summarize, always make sure that you know the nature of the company before you interview, because depending on what type of company it is, you're going to be able to make some assumptions, and their way of working and the most likely way things are going to work in that company, well, that's something you're going to be able to figure out from just knowing the nature of the company. Always find out what tech stack they're using, because the job that you're going to have within that company and the tech stack, with a little bit of experience and just a few looks at what's out there, you're going to be able to figure out fairly quickly what type of office culture and the way that they do work at that company, how that actually works, just from looking at the tools they are using. And make sure that you always talk to your future team members if you can, because it is very important. Because remember, these are the people who are going to mentor you. And once you have a few years under your belt, you can kind of do whatever you want. But I really urge you to think about this, because in the beginning of your career, it is really important that you have other developers who really know their stuff around you, so you can ask questions and grow as part of a software team. Because remember, learning from other people is the way that you get better at what that's how you're going to develop your skills. And hopefully this was useful to you. Have a great day.